Hey everyone! So this week I will be discussing the miniseries Flowers in the Attic, The Origin. It aired on Lifetime in 2022, 8 years after the Flowers in the Attic 2014 remake. And it seems to take the story in not only a different direction than the source material, which was the 1986 ghost-written V.C. Andrews prequel, Garden of Shadows. It also deviates from the narrative laid out in the first four Dollenganger movies that aired on Lifetime between 2014 and 2015. For example, the character of John Amos, Olivia Foxworth's cousin, was killed off in the fourth and final episode of the Origin miniseries. He plays a critical role in the storyline of If There Be Thorns, which is supposed to take place about 40 years later. This is just one example I can think of off the top of my head. I will start by giving an overall summary of the four episodes of the miniseries, and then I will talk a little bit about the changes I liked and the changes that maybe didn't work quite as well as I go through each 90-minute segment of the story. My hope is that they will one day remake Flowers in the Attic and Petals on the Wind as miniseries, either on Lifetime or on Netflix. If we could get 6 episodes for each and altering perspectives, that would be a dream come true for me. I just want to say up front that I think they did a great job with The Origin. They really enhanced the story, in my opinion. So the first episode is called The Marriage, and it is about how Olivia Winfield first met and married Malcolm Foxworth, played by Jeremy Irons' son, Max Irons. Olivia is played by Jemima Roper, and she reminds me of a mix of Julia Roberts, Kira Sedgwick, and Hilary Swank. I won't go too much into the similarities between the book and the movie because I do a complete recap of Garden of Shadows in 6 videos I released just prior to this one. In the miniseries, Olivia soon discovers after moving in with her new husband that he's not the loving man she had hoped he would be. He is troubled by a sad childhood. His mother abandoned him when he was young, and he remains obsessed with her to this day. In fact, he seems to get off on having his conquests do a little bit of Oedipal role-playing. Olivia meets the staff at her new home of Foxworth Hall. Mrs. Steiner is a real piece of work, but Nella is nice, and Olivia and Nella become friendly with each other. In the first episode, Olivia takes a look around the attic, but is scared off by rodents, much like what happened in the book. She is assaulted by Malcolm time and again, and she births him 2 sons, the oldest Mal, and then after the second son, Joel, the doctor informs them that she is incapable of having more children, and this infuriates Malcolm. He demands his wife give him a daughter. And then Malcolm announces that his father, Garland, will be returning to the mansion with his wife, Alicia. Garland is played by Kelsey Grammer. Alicia is a very young woman. In the book, she is 19, I believe. I'm not sure if it gives her age in the miniseries, but she looks very young. Way too young to be tied down to a man of Garland's age. She is also pregnant. Alicia is a very bubbly person who can talk your ear off. She tells tales of her travels with Garland. Olivia is jealous of this younger woman, but unlike in the book, she seems more open to being her friend. Unlike Olivia and Malcolm, Garland and Alicia are much more affectionate with each other and share a bedroom. Also, in this episode, Nella is let go for some reason. Christopher Garland Foxworth is born to Garland and Alicia. Malcolm's father dies suspiciously after catching Malcolm attacking Alicia in her bed. Olivia convinces the doctor not to do an autopsy because she suspects it will look bad for her husband. Olivia learns that Malcolm actually killed Garland by pinning him to the wall. After Garland's death, Malcolm goes on to assault Alicia multiple times and impregnates her. Olivia is so enraged when she learns about this that she gets a knife and apparently slaughters an animal for dinner. Then she convinces Nella to come back to work at Foxworth Hall. Nella's daughter, Celia, doesn't want her mother to associate with those Foxworth people. Then Olivia confronts Malcolm and tells him how it's going to be. Alicia will be kept in the East Wing during her pregnancy. She will be given double her inheritance after the baby is born. Olivia and Malcolm's sons will be given $2 million each in a trust fund so that they can have freedom when they become adults. She uses the threat of revealing what he did to his father as a way to get control over the situation, and this is essentially where the first episode ends, with Olivia preparing to fake a pregnancy so that she can take the baby from Alicia after she secretly gives birth months later. This episode is different from the book in a few ways. First of all, and most glaring, is that the character of Nella was not in the book. I do like that Olivia has this camaraderie with one of the servants. It is a bond that will alter as the years go by, becoming stronger, but also being tested at other points. Nella's family will also play an important role in the series. Also, I found Olivia to be much more sympathetic in the series overall than she was in the book Garden of Shadows. In the book, she takes an attitude with the servants, and the servants like to gossip about how miserable she is. Olivia seems much more cheerful in this first episode, at least at first. She becomes more cynical over time, but she still seems to show more compassion for others. There's no mention of Olivia trying to cause Alicia to have a miscarriage like there was in the book. In the book, she was so jealous of Alicia's unborn child, Christopher, that she tempted her to go up in the attic, hoping she'd trip and fall up there and lose the baby. Of course, she tried to discourage Alicia from going up there so that it couldn't be said that she was the one responsible if Alicia did go on to fall. But that was her intent the whole time. And another thing in the book, it is stated that Garland died of a heart attack. It is implied that Malcolm drove him to have a heart attack, but I don't believe it is implied that he literally killed him. Overall, I liked the first episode. I think it was good that Olivia was made to be more of a sympathetic character because it helps us to see her side of the story, and the addition of Nella opens up possibilities for some tense plot lines in the future. I do feel that the events in this episode were a little rushed. In the book, Chris is 3 when Alicia is impregnated by Malcolm. In the miniseries, I think maybe a year or 2 has passed, but there isn't much said about the 3 boys, Olivia's 2 sons, and Alicia's boy, Christopher. In the book, Olivia talks about how abusive Malcolm was to the kids, whipping the oldest Mel, for example, when catching him playing piano with Alicia. I do want to add that Andrew Niederman, who ghost wrote the book Garden of Shadows, was a consultant for this miniseries. Moving on to the second episode, this one is called The Mother. Olivia informs the servants that she will be having a baby, and she makes a big show of Alicia leaving Foxworth Hall to find new living quarters for herself and her son. She will be leaving Christopher with Malcolm and Olivia until she gets herself settled elsewhere. Of course, this is all part of the charade. She will be coming back to the mansion late at night and sneaking into the attic room in the East Wing, where the Dollenganger kids will also be kept locked up in flowers in the attic 35 years later. In the book, it's the North Wing. I'm not sure why they made that small change. Olivia fires the maid, Mrs. Steiner, who has been gossiping about crying she's heard in the night. Steiner is not pleased at all. Olivia promotes Nella to head housekeeper. Her first order of business will be to keep the other servants out of the East Wing. This is when Nella lets it slip that there's a second entrance to the attic, which used to be used by the servants. Olivia is disturbed to learn this bit of information because it means that Malcolm can use that entrance to get into the attic and then exit through the stairwell in the closet that leads right into the chambermaid's room where Alicia is being kept hidden. Olivia had thought she was keeping him out of there by holding the only key to the room. She has the second entrance sealed off. When Olivia next pays Alicia a visit, the younger woman is distraught because Malcolm has somehow found a way inside of her room at night, despite the fact that Olivia had promised to keep her safe from him. Olivia says the only way to ensure Malcolm never touches her again is to cut her pretty hair, just like in the book. Malcolm is so upset to find the hair on his desk that he threatens to have Olivia committed if she dares do something like that again to him. Olivia's threats of exposure are no longer having the same effect on him, and to prove that he still has the upper hand, he stabs her in her fake pregnancy belly, just to give her a little taste of what could happen if she continues to rebel against him, I guess. Olivia follows Malcolm to a house of ill repute, as she calls it, after hearing his footsteps late at night. She finds out that there is a Miss Hazel at this location. Miss Hazel apparently performs abortions. That will become important later on, but not right now. Christopher, who is missing his mother, asks Olivia if he can call her mommy. Like in the book, Olivia and the young boy form a bond. In the miniseries, Alicia actually pounds on the window of her room to try to get the attention of the boys playing outside, one of which is her young son. Olivia is angry at her for trying to draw attention to herself and putting their plan at risk. Olivia points out that she's never worked before and can't afford to leave while pregnant, not having any money to support herself and her child. Alicia doesn't care anymore about any of that. She just wants her freedom, and unlike in the book, she actually makes an attempt to flee, even as Olivia warns her of how dangerous Malcolm could be. After escaping the room, Alicia falls while running down the stairs, and so now Malcolm and Olivia are in a position where they need to figure out how to try and save the baby. I don't think either of them really care about Alicia's safety, and if she wasn't pregnant, this probably would have ended very differently, with a discreet burial in the surrounding woods. Olivia takes control of the situation. She calls a doctor, trusting him to keep his mouth shut. Alicia regains consciousness after receiving care from the doctor, and she begins to rant and rave about being held prisoner. The doctor believes Olivia and Malcolm's lies when they tell him that the young woman is delusional and decides that the best course of action is to drug his patient in order to calm her down. Olivia has an injured ankle now due to the altercation with Alicia, and so she will need some help caring for the pregnant woman. She reaches out to Nella for assistance. Nella is not pleased with being brought into this ruse, but she agrees. Nella tells Alicia to play along and do whatever she can to keep the baby safe. She tells Alicia that she can relate because she too was assaulted by Malcolm. Celia is Malcolm's daughter, and Nella puts up with him because he pays for her child's education. Olivia thinks that she and Nella are friends, but Nella informs her that they're not and that Olivia doesn't know anything about her. But she does help with the secret pregnancy and even serves as midwife. Alicia, after giving birth to the baby, reveals that she'd actually been hoping it would be a boy, just to spite Malcolm, I guess. But it's a girl, and Malcolm calls her Corinne. Alicia and Christopher leave. Now we skip ahead 16 years. The oldest son, Mal, is engaged to a woman named Helen. Mal wants access to his trust fund early, but he has to wait until he's 25. In the book, he gets his trust fund at 18. His mother tells him that if he wants the money now, he'll have to speak about it with his father. When Mal does have that talk with his father, though, it doesn't go well. Eventually, Mal learns from his brother Joel that there is reason to believe that Celia might be their father's illegitimate child. Their sister Corinne has always known this because she's heard the rumors. Mal uses this knowledge as a way to blackmail his father into giving him his trust fund money early by threatening to tell his mother if Malcolm doesn't do so. But Malcolm turns the tables on him by calling Olivia into the room and coming right out and informing her of his indiscretion so that Mal doesn't have to. So apparently he will only be getting his money early over Malcolm's dead body. Nella and Olivia do reconcile after Olivia learns the truth of Celia's parentage. Olivia understands Nella in a way she didn't before. Meanwhile, as this is all going on, Joel, the younger of the two sons, is making eyes at Celia's stepson, Harry. Harry is a mechanic who works on Joel's car, and they bond over their love of blues music. They live very different lives, but on some level, they are both trapped in a life they do not care for. Now, as for Corinne, she is a teenager, and Malcolm is still gifting her with dolls as though she were a child. Corinne and Olivia have a close relationship. Corinne confides in her mother that she knows Olivia and Malcolm's marriage is basically a loveless one. Olivia wants her daughter to enjoy her youth and not rush into anything. Olivia feels that Corinne should have a chance to go to dances and interact with different boys so that she doesn't jump at the first marriage proposal. Malcolm feels differently, and when Malcolm forbids Corinne from going to a dance, Olivia lets her sneak out and go. This results in Corinne being impregnated by a boy named Rockford Taylor, and Olivia takes Corinne to Miss Hazel to get an abortion. Malcolm finds out about this and is furious. Olivia, after reconciling with Nella, begins to realize that Malcolm is a threat to them all unless she does something to stop him. There is a poison garden on their property, and she enters the garden to pick some berries. And then the next thing you know, Malcolm is choking on his food at the dinner table. Olivia figures out it was Corinne who poisoned him. I'm not sure why we were led to believe Olivia was the one planning to do him in, but apparently Corinne followed her mother and learned about the garden that way. She wanted to make her father a little sick so that she could sneak out of the house. Also, she's frustrated with the way her father treats everyone, but this echoes the poisoning she will later do to her own children in Flowers in the Attic. Malcolm recovers, and when the doctor informs him that he was poisoned, Malcolm's first thought is that it was his oldest son, looking to eliminate him so that he could get access to his trust fund money early. Olivia implies that she herself could have easily been the one who attempted to murder him, and that, in fact, there are many people who want him dead, and the suspect list is endless. Malcolm, for some reason, decides to blackmail Mal's bride on her wedding day. He will agree to give Mal the money early if she does a favor for him, and we all know what that favor is now, don't we? Mal walks in on the two of them kissing. He snaps, grabs a container of weed, and then goes for a drive. At one point, Corinne climbs into the car with him. She discovers the weed he's smoking is actually poison, and then he starts reacting to the stuff, and he crashes, and he dies. Olivia and Corinne feel so guilty for their part in Mal's death. Olivia, from this point on, does not trust her own judgment and decides to leave all decisions to Malcolm going forward. When she tried to act independently of him, this is what happened. Basically, most of what happens in this episode was not in the book. Mal was not engaged. He died around the age of 21-ish in a motorcycle accident. May have been a little younger than that. I'm not sure. But Joel was described as fragile and weak and a good piano player, but he was not openly gay in the novel. Now, it's certainly an interesting twist on his character, but it was not actually stated in the book. Corinne does not get pregnant and have an abortion in the novel. In fact, it seemed as though much of Corinne's growing up years was described in summary in the book. I liked how the miniseries added dramatic scenes that the book didn't really have. The miniseries really fleshed out the characters more. And I really grew to care about Corinne, seeing her as something more than a spoiled brat. She actually comes across as quite sensitive and caring. And the poisoning episode was not in the novel either. I've already mentioned that Nella was not in the book, and so neither was Celia or her stepson, Harry. Also, the miniseries really drives home the fact that Malcolm has been watching Corinne inappropriately. In the book, it was Olivia who seemed to do more inappropriate spying on her young daughter through a hole in the wall. But in the miniseries, Olivia senses that Malcolm has gross feelings for his daughter and is in danger of acting on them. And this is part of her motivation for wanting him dead. Though, as of yet, she has not seriously acted on this desire. Corinne has, and it is one of the telling signs that she may not be as innocent as she seems to be. But overall, in the miniseries, Corinne just seemed to be a more nuanced, likable character, aside from the poisoning. Now, the third episode is called The Murderer. There isn't any murder in the book, so this is getting interesting. Alicia returns to Foxworth Hall to inform Olivia and Malcolm that she is dying of cancer and would like them to take in her son Christopher and pay for his medical school education. It's interesting that she has breast cancer. Kitty Dennison, a character in V.C. Andrews' 1985 novel Heaven, also died of breast cancer, and I've read that V.C. Andrews herself died of breast cancer in 1986 when Garden of Shadows was released. Alicia informs Malcolm and Olivia that she lost her money in the stock market crash. In the book, Olivia convinces Malcolm to take in Christopher, but in the miniseries, she does not trust herself to make that decision, so she leaves it up to her husband. Her husband agrees to help out his brother, but Christopher must work for his room and board and his education. He will not be given a handout. Meanwhile, Malcolm is tired of listening to his son Joel play the piano. Joel takes Corinne shopping for a dress to wear to an upcoming ball. She's frustrated that her father won't let her go away to school like he has with Joel. She feels like her father is oppressive and trying to prevent her from growing up. She pesters Joel to tell her about a girl she suspects he's seeing, but we all know that Joel isn't seeing any girl. While walking along a sidewalk, they run into Mrs. Steiner. She was always a bit of a nasty lady, and she certainly has no respect for Joel, seeing as how he is a Foxworth. She resents that he doesn't have to work for a living like she does. He tells Corinne that she's their old maid who was fired before Corinne was born. At the store, Corinne meets a handsome blonde man. He is Christopher Foxworth, her half-uncle and half-brother, but she doesn't know it's him just yet. The two of them flirt. Joel and Harry's relationship is pretty serious now. Joel is giving him a fancy watch, and they're talking about traveling together. Malcolm walks in on the two of them kissing on a piano bench. Malcolm informs Olivia of what her piano-playing son has been up to. Then he informs the police that Harry is a thief, and the police come to arrest him, making a big spectacle of it, hauling him to Malcolm's door at night so that Malcolm can identify him while the Foxworth family and Harry's own family watch on. Nella begs Olivia to speak up and defend her step-grandson, but Olivia says nothing, and neither does Joel. The police punch Harry and bang him up pretty good. As for Joel, he'll be sent to a sanatorium for some electric shock therapy. Joel is infuriated with his mother for standing by and letting this happen, and actually giving her consent. He asks her to, at the very least, pass a letter on to Harry. Moonlight Sonata plays while Joel is driven to the facility. Corinne wants to know what happened to her brother. Malcolm tells her he left for Montreal, and Olivia explains he's going to be studying with a musician. All lies. Corinne has suspicions, so she goes snooping around and finds a letter written by either Joel or Harry, I'm not sure which, but she brings the letter to Harry, who's been released from custody by this point, and she finds out what actually happened to her brother. Chris is living with the family now. Corinne found out that the young guy that she had a crush on at the store is actually her long-lost uncle. So they have a little bit of a friendship going now. She feels safe enough to ask him, Chris, the aspiring doctor, what he knows about a place called Westmoreland Sanatorium. Chris says they're pretty extreme, so Corinne and Christopher go to talk with Olivia and convince her to break Joel out. Olivia is horrified when she sees how out of it Joel is in the hospital. She takes him out of the facility by paying someone off and then brings him to Nella. She pleads with Nella to have mercy on her son if no one else. After all, her son did finally speak up on Harry's behalf. Corinne is angry at her mother for letting it come to this. She runs off and gets on a horse. It starts to storm. Malcolm organizes a search party. Christopher finds her lying in the rainy woods and takes her to a chapel where he bandages her wound. They kiss. Malcolm comes upon them and is relieved that Corinne is okay. He doesn't see them kiss. He tells Christopher that his debt has been paid and he doesn't have to do yard work anymore to pay his way through school. Christopher rejects Corinne when she tries to continue what they started. There's another storyline going on involving Mrs. Steiner snooping at the doctor's office where she works and finding out about Joel's stay in the sanatorium, and that he's homosexual. She blackmails Olivia, demanding $3,000. Olivia informs Malcolm. Joel leaves Nella's place and comes home to pack a suitcase. He's told Corinne earlier that he was planning on running away. At home, he stops by his piano just to see if he can still play it even after his brain has been fried. Malcolm is not at his office after all and catches him at the piano. He is furious that Joel has been taken out of the hospital without his permission. He threatens to disown Joel and blames Olivia for all of the problems in their family. Olivia, in turn, blames Malcolm, and Malcolm hits her. Joel and Harry talk about leaving together. Joel doesn't want to drag Harry into this, but he eventually relents. Joel and his mother say their goodbyes. They're on good terms now. Joel wants her to get away from Foxworth Hall before something bad happens. Mrs. Steiner confronts Malcolm, but he no longer cares what she has to say. He has no son as far as he's concerned. Mrs. Steiner shows up at the ball later on and informs Olivia that she knows about Corinne's real mother. She wants $5,000 now. Fool. Never try to blackmail a crazy woman. Olivia locks Mrs. Steiner in the library office before going off to talk with Malcolm. When she returns, Mrs. Steiner is furious. During an altercation, Olivia accidentally knocks her out. Malcolm appears. Olivia wants to call the doctor, but her husband stops her. He bludgeons Mrs. Steiner with the phone, and the two of them must now bury the body in the woods. The episode ends with Corinne telling Christopher that she loves him, and Olivia catching the two of them in bed together. Once again, almost everything in this episode was made up for the miniseries, but I don't mind. In the book, Christopher does come to live with them after Joel ran away from home. Joel is lost in an avalanche and presumed dead. And Corinne and Christopher do become close and end up together. What I like about this third episode of the miniseries is that there's more action and drama, and even a murder. So episode 4 is called The Martyr, and it opens with Olivia confronting Corinne and Christopher with what she has witnessed. Corinne doesn't think it's that big of a deal. Who cares about the rules of society? And what about the Greeks and the Romans who think nothing of getting it on with anyone they please? She is willing to risk being disinherited. Olivia is like, oh no, Malcolm is capable of much worse than you know. Olivia informs them that they are half-siblings and that Malcolm Alicia. She says she will keep their secret if they keep hers. Corinne and Chris meet in private and decide to run away, but they need money, so Corinne goes looking for some. She breaks into the safe and discovers her grandfather's will, which leaves half of his fortune to his younger son, Christopher. Malcolm comes upon her snooping, and she tells him what she has found. He's like, Christopher doesn't deserve that money. He didn't work and suffer for it the way I did. Corinne accuses him of stooping so low as to steal from a child, and he tells her, everything I do for you. What is this, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves? Have we traveled back to that horrible era in the early 90s when you couldn't escape Bryan Adams? In a way, this is Robin Hood. Corinne is looking to take money from the rich to give it to the poor, herself and Christopher. Olivia walks in and catches Malcolm acting gross with Corinne. Once again, she goes all 4 non-blondes on him. What's up? Malcolm accuses Corinne of breaking into the safe, and Olivia is like, I thought we had an agreement. So this leads to this big showdown that didn't occur in the book. Malcolm hunts down Christopher, who mysteriously has a gun now, and Malcolm manages to get the gun from him and shove him up against the wall. He tells him he will kill Christopher like he killed his father. Olivia storms in and fires a shot to scare Malcolm off. Nella's family hears the shot and gets worried. Corinne strikes her father with an object of some kind, and she and Christopher dash toward the staircase, with Malcolm following after them. Down in the foyer, Corinne shows Christopher her grandfather's will. Malcolm snatches it away and throws it into the fire. Malcolm finds out Corinne knows the truth that she's also Alicia's child, and Nella's family comes rushing in. One of them has a gun with him. Corinne says, my dad's trying to kill Christopher. Malcolm doesn't even try to deny it. Corinne is like, if I'm so sinful, then what about you? I know you are, but what am I? She blasts out the truth about Celia right there in the foyer. Everyone already knows anyway. Malcolm disowns her then and there. Later on, Corinne and Olivia are having a private chat. Corinne feels bad that she didn't do more to help her mother when she knew what her mother was dealing with. Olivia is like, that's not your problem, and everything is forgiven. But Olivia still refuses to accept the idea of Christopher and Corinne being together, and I understand that. It's kind of a tough hill to climb, I admit it. Christopher confronts Malcolm with a gun and is like, you killed my dad, you SA'd my mom, prepare to die. Malcolm is like, before you make any rash decisions here, there's something I need to tell you. My daughter is a selfish She got an abortion. You don't want a woman like that. And Christopher starts to think, maybe I don't. So Malcolm decides it's time to make a little deal. Nothing like a little cool, hard cash to fix a problem like your daughter wanting to run off and get married to her brother. Christopher comes to Corinne's room to say goodbye. Olivia gives them some privacy. She confronts Malcolm and finds out what he did. And during this time, Corinne and Christopher escape the hall. It looks like they might have stolen some goods from Malcolm and Olivia to hawk before they did so. Apparently the bribe money wasn't enough. So now Olivia is alone in the house with Malcolm. Malcolm is still up to his old tricks. So Olivia decides that maybe the time has come to take the law into her own hands. She decides to tamper with Malcolm's car late at night. Nella catches her and is like, oh, friend, I know exactly how you feel. If I wasn't so afraid for my family, I would run off and become a singer in New York, but I know you, and you're too good of a person to do something like this. Plus, if you tamper with his car, the police will know it's not an accident, and one of my boys will hang for it, so please don't do that. So Olivia decides to take a handsaw to the balcony railing instead. Malcolm leans up against it one day and falls to the foyer below, while his wife is sitting by herself and reading a little Poe, putting herself in the right mood, I guess. Olivia calls the cops, and unfortunately, he pulls through, but he's in a wheelchair and completely dependent on Olivia's care. Corinne and Christopher, meanwhile, rent their first little dump of an apartment. Nella can go away now, and she's so grateful to Olivia. Olivia makes herself president of Foxworth Industries and rubs it in Malcolm's face. Olivia invites her cousin John Amos to stay with her. I forgot to mention that John is in the first episode, and there is a scene where she tries to escape Malcolm by running back to her father, only to find out that her father is dead and that he hasn't left her any money. It should be noted that this is different from the book, because in the book, she never tries to run away, and her father does die, but he does leave her money. Anyway, John and Olivia bond now that Olivia has no one else. John tells her that Corinne has chosen to live a life of sin, and Olivia must not waste any time feeling sorry for her or missing her. Olivia wants to repent for any sins she has committed. John is a very deeply religious man, and he is touched by Olivia's show of faith. It's been about 10 years since Corinne and Christopher ran away, and Olivia decides to hire a detective to track them down. She needs some closure. She finds out they live in Pittsburgh. In the book, it's Gladstone, Pennsylvania, which I think is a made-up town. They have 4 children who appear to be healthy, and the family is referred to as the Dresden Dolls. Not long after, a cop comes to interrupt an outdoor party and informs Corinne that her husband was killed in a crash. John takes a call from the private investigator and learns this sad fact. He informs Olivia of Christopher's death. Olivia decides it's time to rid her home of sin. She burns her possessions in the front yard of her mansion and calls it a new beginning. John says it's God's will that Corinne is facing this time of hardship as she struggles to put food on her children's table. Nella says she doesn't believe God would starve young children like that. John says that there is such a thing as forgiveness, but you need to ask for it, and Corinne hasn't done that. Nella pleads with Olivia to open her heart to her daughter. And then a letter comes and fills Olivia with hope. Corinne has finally reached out to her and asked for help. Olivia turns against Nella because Nella feels that forgiveness should be freely given, whereas Olivia feels it should be earned. Now all Olivia has is John. The two of them go to be alone together in a little chapel in the woods. She confesses that she accidentally killed Mrs. Steiner and attempted to kill Malcolm, but he doesn't hate her for this. Instead, he finds her incredibly attractive for some reason. He kisses her, and she is furious because he is trying to do with her the same thing he condemned Corinne for. She is his cousin. Later on, he comes to her room and attacks her. She stabs him in defense, and blood splatters all over her dollhouse, which she kept from childhood. She buries John just like she buried Mrs. Steiner. The miniseries ends with Corinne coming back to the house with her 4 children and Olivia locking them in the room. They are told by their mother it will only be for the night, but Olivia has no intention of ever letting them out. I don't understand why she suddenly became this evil religious nutcase. In the book, it was John Amos who convinced her to lock the kids away forever. He held this sick power over her, but in the miniseries, he's dead. And that's problematic because it contradicts the If There Be Thorns storyline from 40 years later, when John Amos and Corinne move in next door to Kathy and Chris to warp the mind of their young son Bart. Also, Corinne was so much stronger and opinionated in the miniseries. It's hard to see her agreeing to let her kids be locked up and even going so far as to poison them. I can understand why she would have poisoned her father, but not her beloved children. She's not as weak in the miniseries, and she doesn't seem to care as much for money as she does in the books. In fact, it's Christopher who tells her they can't run off without having money to sustain them. The final episode is also very different from Garden of Shadows. In the book, Olivia turns on her daughter and brother-in-law the minute she catches them together, and John Amos is living in the house at the time. Malcolm immediately throws the 2 young lovers out on the streets, and there is no final showdown. Olivia does not cause Malcolm to end up in a wheelchair. In fact, in the books, we learn that Malcolm ends up in the wheelchair because of a stroke brought on by the stress of what happened with Corinne. So overall, the miniseries is very different from the source material, and I do not feel the transformation of Olivia and Corinne in the end made much sense, but I do think it was much more dramatic and action-packed, and I recommend it.